the deputy directors of the Pankhurst, and I also am a jobbing clinician working at MFT, Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust. So I work quite closely with Claire and Michael, who are the lead and members of our clinical data science unit. And we thought it was an opportunity for them to come and talk to you about the work that they're doing to sort of leverage healthcare data at MFT and make it available for researchers at the University of Manchester and beyond. So yeah, it's quite an exciting program of work that I think that they've been pursuing over the last about 5 years now. But I'll say no more and hand over to them to tell you all about it.
Thanks, Anthony. So I'm starting off the session this afternoon. Thanks for inviting us along to talk about our service. We are known as the Clinical Data Science Unit, or CDSU, at MFT. I'm Claire MacDonald, I'm the lead for the unit, and Michael Smith joining me is the program manager. And apologies if I keep looking away, I've got several screens and I've got slides on one and the meeting on another. So just a bit of background information around the activity and data in the trust. So it's the largest NHS trust in England. We cover 21.9% of 21.9% of our population are classed as income deprived. We have an excess of 2.8 million, but our records are much larger than that because obviously we cover deceased patients as well over time. So the sort of 2.8 million is our living population over 10 hospitals and 7 sites. We have a large inpatient and outpatient based activity, lots of records coming through, obviously the EPRs. We have 56 million, or be more than that now, data points on our patients, and churning through terabytes of data per month, basically, with all this activity. Our main EPR now is Epic, but we do have what we call legacy data sets from prior to Epic, which was installed at the end of, I think it was 2022. So prior to that, there were multiple EPRs, and we have got records from those as well. So it's not just from Epic. The data has multiple formats, as I'm sure you're probably aware. So we have structured data, we have unstructured data. They can come in the form of images, PDFs, XMLs, SQL tables, waveforms. They come from different aspects of healthcare. It can be pharmacy, transfers, acute activity, outpatient activity, community activity, and they all kind of constantly get fed in to our environments. And we have different refresh schedules for different data sets as well. So some are daily, some are weekly, some are monthly. Our CDSU is sort of couched within MFT. So MFT, being the largest trust, has got a lot of infrastructure that kind of wraps around us to kind of shore up our infrastructure. It is a Shelford Group trust, so we're also supported by that Shelford Group network. We do have a 4-year track record of the project delivery because we've been now established for quite a while. Our infrastructure has a lot of wraparound governance and permissions, which we've worked on very hard to make sure that we're producing something that is of the highest quality and safety standard we can possibly do. We are ISO 27001 certified. We have been for 3 years, so we're quite established in that now. We have a secure data environment with a TRE, cloud-based TRE, which I'll go through later. And then we have established processes, which are a streamlined version of IRAS, if you're familiar with that, which allows you to go through a kind of proportionate devolved IRAS process, which is quicker than the kind of traditional one that you would go through for something like a clinical trial. We are part of quite a few national networks, including the HDR UK Alliance, which is a large group of not just NHS, but academic and commercial and third sector organisations that come together to try and improve healthcare data and social care data, and just access to data and the quality of data in general when being used for research. Again, we are supported by a sort of large infrastructure which helps us to perform our activity and make sure our service is running. So the kind of MFT approvals we have, we've got a few of those to kind of evidence that we're not just going around grabbing data randomly. We are properly monitored, we're properly approved, and we do have all the permissions needed and required to be able to surface this data and deliver projects for people when they apply. Our innovation department or directorate, we sort of sit between two. So we sit between R&I and informatics, and on the R&I strand, we come under mainly innovation. We are supported by their IP and legal teams when we're contracting. We are also supported by the wider information governance and cyber teams. So obviously we've got cloud environments, we've got different types of infrastructure set up. Our data center, for example, is also involved in helping make sure that's all appropriately managed and safe. And the Caldecott Guardian is part of our strategy group, and we do have appropriate permissions from the Caldecott Research Office and the executive level of MFT. And with those permissions, and I know this is a very busy looking slide, basically what it allows us to do is use data on any person who's registered MFT for secondary use purposes. So we can link to, within our permissions, data from elsewhere that is sort of donated to a project, if you like, as long as that person is registered at MFT. Our permissions cover that use, and we don't need extra permissions to do that. We do apply a lot of processes and services, some of which are listed in that bottom left corner, starting with the national data opt-out, which is applied at every project level. That is updated in our servers multiple times a day. So if somebody is, for whatever reason, opting in and out, we still capture that when we are generating cohorts for projects. We have quite a few data pipelines coming in, like I mentioned before. Some of them are quite specialized and have to be specifically architected to cope with that type of data. For example, the PACS data and the waveform data, they have completely different types of feed and retrieval from something like the structured data. We have at the moment 48 clinical data sets that are available for and ready for routine use. We do have access to a lot more, but those are the ones that we've kind of made generally available for quick access or quicker access and retrieval for ourselves to facilitate projects. We have a lot of activity going on. As you can see, there's a kind of list there of project breakdown. That's our current status. It's not over time, that's just currently what is on the stack. We've covered 47 subject areas so far with 154 PIs, so you can see there's quite a lot of activity going on. And we have 26 main pieces of infrastructure to look after, which includes our cloud-based TRE, but is not, limited to that. We have a lot of on-prem servers. We have an HPC cluster, which I'll mention later. And just a lot of things for us to manage. And if you notice at the top, there's only 7 of us. So we're a very small team with a lot to cover. But the way our processes are designed helps us, enables us to do that in the best way that we can. If you are looking for a list of the data that's available, we're making them available on the HDR UK Innovation Gateway. This is currently a smaller set than what is actually available because we have to package them in a specific way to surface them on the gateway. I think at the moment there's 15 listed there. We'll be loading more over the next month. But that gives you a kind of metadata breakdown as well. So it doesn't just list it. There's a little bit of a data dictionary, some metadata, which helps you to try and understand is this going to contain the kind of data that I need from my project? Will I need to link it to anything extra? You can see our population stats there. So we probably needs updated now. At that point, it was 4.1 million people we had some sort of ethnicity status on, for example. So it gives you kind of headline ballpark figures and then lets you kind of delve down as you click through to sort of more specific groupings as well for you to understand what's mixed into that data set. You can also, on that gateway, obviously browse other people's data sets as well. And if you wanted to do something like a project that involved 3 or 4 SDs or TREs, it is possible to do that, and we have got mechanisms to facilitate that as well. So a little bit more about the infrastructure. We do have a website. The website lists the kind of main functions. It tells you a little bit about our data access committee, which Michael will speak about at the end. That's our public panel. We also list all our approved projects on there by year, so that there's a record of what the data is being used for. So if your project's approved, it would get listed on our website. We have done our what's called SARTRA benchmarking. So that's going to be basically the accreditation process, the national accreditation process for safe havens or SDs, whatever you want to call them. And we are externally audited by the highest possible level of auditor. So it's a government-backed and government-certified auditing process that's carried out by an independent external third-party organization. So our audits are quite rigorous. We have to do a lot of internal auditing as well as external, and we are thankfully able to constantly demonstrate that we're accountable and transparent and that our processes are working. As mentioned before, we've got a lot of data from EPRs. It's not always EPRs. They can be phenotypically sort of specific curated databases that have come from clinical services, for example, that they might have been working up over time on their patient groups and now want them to be included for research purposes. The larger kind of chunky ones obviously come from the EPRs, but it is possible to link these things together and get a kind of more phenotypically rich project data set to work with. We are able to extract from free text, and we have different pipelines for that. And we've done some work with the Christie. We did a project with the Christie for a specific service where we were using documents to try and understand the difference between diagnosis at MFT and the Christie and what did that mean for patients. So that was, there's different styles of projects we can facilitate. It's not just epidemiological, for example. There can be like pretty much any style. We call ourselves technique agnostic and disease agnostic. So if you've got an idea, we'll have a go at understanding how we can facilitate it with the data. We do a lot of training. So we have MFT mandatory training like everybody else, but we also have a lot of national mandatory training. And we also help train other people. We take part in internship programs. We facilitate students as well from master's programs and PhD programs. And we also undertake a lot of voluntary training to make sure that we're constantly keeping on top of our skill set and making sure that we're providing the best service that we possibly can with the patients in mind and their privacy and everything. We have got professional standards which are not mandatory yet, but we do follow them, and a few of us are registered with FEDIP, which is the Federation of Informatics Professionals. So this is kind of the mess diagram of what our infrastructure sort of looks like. We've not worked out a better way of visualizing this, but that's how it all sort of interconnects. The data sets come in through a secure transfer from regardless of where they're coming from, and they sort of land in this main blue box or blue outline box, and then sort of go to different types of infrastructure to be managed or surfaced depending on the data set and any kind of projects being run on it. All of our governance and devolved approvals are constantly monitored and managed and pushed through, and the data is pushed through these cycles to make sure they come out the other end appropriate to the context and project and to the obligations that we have in terms of legal and regulatory. Most projects will be done as pseudonymized data. If they're patient level, sometimes we'll produce anonymized data or aggregated data if we're doing a feasibility. But most projects that people request access for will be facilitated with pseudonymized data. And it would be provided in files. They're normally CSV because that's just the most common one that people request, but they can be produced in other formats. And within that, there will be a pseudonymized linker between the files so that you can link and analyze the data between the files. We have three main ways of sort of surfacing the data. The most common one is that blue box at the bottom. That's our cloud analytical platform environment. We do have a commercial layer and we have on-prem functionality as well. Occasionally we will send data, like I say, to another SD or TRE with obviously appropriate safeguards and agreements, but most of them go through that blue box at the bottom. And then what that sort of looks like is this sort of, this is a conceptual model of how the TRE works. So we host it in our own tenancy, which is separate from the main MFT tenancy. And then there's what's called an airlock. So anything that's requested, you can request your own software, your own data, for example, to go in as part of your project. If you need it linked, we'll do that for you and pseudonymize it prior to pushing it in. It goes through the airlock and then it goes into a workspace, which is accessed by you and nominated members of your project team. You do your analysis in there. That is only accessible by you. I can't see it. Michael can't see it. Like, we can see that the workspace is there, but we can't see inside it. Every single workspace is isolated from each other. So if somebody imports something harmful or creates something harmful, they can only harm their own space. And it's all very controlled and locked down. And if you would like something out, you request it out through the airlock and the reverse process is performed. We do have a disclosure control process to perform on the data that you're trying to get out. There's a whole protocol and everything on that for you to read inside the TRE to make sure that you're trying to output something that's not going to get rejected. And generally, it basically looks like a familiar desktop when you access it. There shouldn't be anything that's completely unfamiliar and scary looking. There's a normal sort of, you can have Windows or a Linux VM, and they'll have normal looking menus for you to browse the software and folders available. The files go into essentially a shared folder within that workspace, so different members of the team can access the same files, but you can also have your own space to work on if you're sort of working up code separately within there. And there's a list there of all the different types of software that are available as standard, but again, we can put non-standard software in. That's not usually a barrier. So we've got some service and infrastructure enhancements that are either being worked up or have been installed already. We do have our own REDCap instance, so we can be involved in projects where REDCap forms need designed. We have our own REDCap forms for our own uses for different things. The HPC cluster is there. We've done our Sartre benchmarking, we just haven't published it yet. OMOP work is going to be, or is in progress on the data. We have the waveform pipeline, imaging pipeline, and we have converted our application form to an electronic process as well now, which will, Michael will sort of briefly show you a screenshot of later. And I'm going to hand over to Michael now.
Okay, so I'll explain a little bit about how we actually work in terms of our project application process and just kind of go through that a little bit and then talk about our data access committee too. So typically, researchers, innovators will contact ourselves. The best way to do that is using our shared email inbox, which is on the presentation, which we'll distribute after. We do have an application form, which, as Claire you mentioned, is about to go online, and I will show you a screenshot of that in a minute. There are several layers of governance, which I'll go through as well in a minute. And then basically, after approval, we would work with the researchers to design a data spec, extract their data, and give you access to the data via the TRE. Of course, it's a bit more complicated than that. There are lots of kind of ifs and buts, but we'll try and outline those now. Claire, next slide, please. Next slide, Claire. Thank you. So this is a little preview of the application form, which will be online soon. It's currently a Word document that is very long. The online application form will make the process seem a bit less onerous. And we've kind of updated the form a little bit so it flows better. So that's coming soon. Next slide, please, Claire. Okay, so this is just kind of a little visualization of the different roles people tend to play in the project pipeline from beginning to end. Typically, my role is in the kind of second the second swim lane, but I do support the fourth and the fifth as well. However, analyst team, but I guess the key point from this slide is that we try and hammer out as much detail as we can during the application process, and then the key part is the designing of the data to spec. Once we've agreed that, we can kind of do all the things that are in box 3 and swim lane 3 and 4. Everything that we release will have gone through an internal testing and validation process. One thing to flag here, and I will flag it again later, is on the 5th swim lane, we on the top box, CDSU price quote, we are a cost recovery service, which means that we ultimately have to pay for ourselves. So we're not a free service to use. There is a charge for using us. It's not a standard charge. It depends on a few different factors, what type of data, etc. We will always attempt to work with budgets, but it just is important to flag that there is a cost to using our service. Next slide, please, Claire. So this is a bit more in detail. And it kind of talks about what our timelines are. We do try and meet with researchers before they submit an application form. And the reason for that is the form is a decent amount of work. It's not hard work, but it will take a researcher some time to complete, and we don't really want to waste time if the project's something that's not viable. So while we do have access to a lot of data and a lot of different types of data, as Claire said, there are some projects that we just can't do, and that's because normally it's because we don't have access to that particular data from that time period. But then also there are kind of, if it's a project you need doing within a month, we normally have a lead time that will not match that. So if timescales don't match, if there's not enough funding for the project, now we will help you try and find the funding, but we normally wouldn't push a project through the application and governance process until there is sufficient funding. So once we kind of have that meeting, we would know a bit more about whether we can go ahead. If we can go ahead, that's the point at which we'd ask the application form to be completed and sent over. We'll get back to you within your 5 days with any queries. We would issue a quote at this point. However, if you need the quote earlier, which we can, there are reasons why that happens. We can normally give a ballpark figure very early, but if you need a quote earlier, we can issue it earlier. But then if we're kind of the mutual assumption that the funding's in place, we would normally issue it after the application form, because the application form gives us a more accurate information with which to make the quote. If you need feasibility, so like a small study to demonstrate that we do have the data to answer your question, we would aim to get this to you within 7 days. We wouldn't charge for that. We're happy to do that to support the application, and then we would move to the approval process, which is two main layers. Basically, is one is we have a peer review process where staff with different roles, mainly across MFT research and innovation, review the project, but there are also clinicians on that board. Two, as long as we're happy that there's no red flags with that, it will proceed to our data access committee, which is the public panel that Claire mentioned earlier. If it's approved, most things do get approved, but if there's a decision that we kind of need more info, we'll tell you what information is needed after the panel, and then we'll give you an opportunity to feed that back to the next panel. Once it's approved, we would aim to have the data with you within 90 days. That's an aspiration. We meet it probably about 70% of the time, but if it's a massively complex data set and you're wanting data from different modalities and linkages and things like that, it might take longer than 90 days, but we would do our best to make you aware of the time frames as we work along. Okay, so another thing to point out that's not on this slide is that once we would put the initial extract of the data in the theory, we would give you 2 weeks to review it, and then if there are issues, we would work with you to resolve them, and then after that you would have access for a standard period of 2 years, and this can be extended via an amendment to using our internal REC process, which Claire mentioned earlier. Okay, next slide, Claire, please. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about our PPIE involvement. The main way in which this is manifested is our data access committee, which is the kind of final layer of approval for project applications. And they are charged with one question, which is this what our patients and community expect MFT to be doing with its data? And they'll get several kind of resources with which to answer that. One will be the project application form, another will be the peer review feedback, and then we ask researchers to come along and join the data access committee and give a lay overview of their presentation, of their project, and then make themselves available for a Q&A. And after that, we would make the decision. Claire, I think there's an extra bit if you click space, which will come up. Yep. So there you go. So the data access committee, which we call DAC, the whole process has been co-designed by the committee itself. The committee consists primarily of carers, patients, volunteers. There is some clinical representation from MFT on there too. We generally meet once per month and aim to review 4 proposals per month. We don't actually convene or organize the data access committee because MFT has a professional function which can do this for us, which is vocal, which I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with, but they're the PPIE arm of MFT. So that committee is the last and probably the most important stage of the approval and the governance process. Next slide, please, Claire. Okay, so just to quickly review a couple of, one recognition that we've been given. We've been nominated for the best sovereign cloud / regulated clouds solution at the Computing Cloud Excellence Award. So we'll find out about that in September. Next slide, Claire. Every year we do a feedback exercise where we contact all of our users of the theory. So that'll be the researchers we worked with over the past year, and we asked them to give some feedback in a structured way, although there is an option for free text too. Last year there was no negative feedback, and the users were generally in agreement that the level of support and help available was good. So we're going to do this exercise again in August. So hopefully it's at least equal. Next slide, please, Claire. Okay, and that's it. That's our QR code, which I'll open up our website. You're welcome to email Claire and myself directly, but generally the best thing to do is to use our shared inbox, which we all look at, and that'll mean that your query will definitely be picked up, even if Claire or myself are absent. We're a team of 7 whole-time equivalents, so we all kind of have different areas, but we all monitor that inbox. And then there's our website at the bottom, which Claire mentioned earlier. So thank you very much for listening. We'll send these out